Welcome to the podcast. Chris Graham and Rod Mullins talking on a Thursday about NASCAR. We had some scheduling issues to get through this week, mainly because of me and all my fun stuff I do outside. We're going to talk, though, about a little bit about last week's race at Homestead down in Miami, and then look ahead to Martinsville this weekend as the NASCAR playoffs continue. And Rod, Tyler Reddick punched his ticket to the championship for last weekend in a stirring last lap kind of situation there. Take us into what happened in Homestead this past weekend.
I think it was one of those things of tires, fuel strategy, a bunch of things combined in order for Tyler Reddick to come away with this. Tyler Reddick had to pit with so many laps left to go. He had just about used up his tires. The rest of the teams were almost in the same situation. And so he goes ahead, he pits, gets his tires, comes back on, starts making up ground incredibly fast through the field. And then right toward the very end, they all kind of had taken, some pit stops and so forth. But here it was. He ended up having the car that no one really wanted to see out on the track. And he comes around, he passes Ryan Blaney, and Ryan Blaney was so sure he was going to get the win. He was pretty darn sure about it until Reddick just passed him, and he made some incredible lap makeup times, if you want to call it that, coming out of going out of the straightaway there on the backstretch and then coming into 3 and 4. That's where he made up tremendous amount of ground, and he just had a car that was, I just feel like nobody could beat him in that car in the final laps of that race.
So he punches his ticket to the championship for now. What does the rest of the field look like as we're trying to narrow from 8 to 4 with Martinsville this weekend, the final cutoff?
Well, it's looking a little bit murky here because we've got some teams that are still kind of floating there that were shoe-ins at one point, and you're not sure if they're going to make it in. They've got to win this coming weekend at Martinsville. You've got people like Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin did not fare as well in this race. He's actually dropped below the cut point. You've got Chase Elliott, who had a great race, and yet he's like 40 some points to the less on this, going negative. And then you've got Kyle Larson, who had at least a good race, and then he ends up wrecking, trying to thread that needle between two cars, messes the car up. He goes into a cursing tirade, much like the music at UVA Scott Stadium, with all the expletives and everything else being said. And he says, this is a effing piece of crap is what he's calling the next generation car. And he says, how can a car go and you lose a tire, you end up breaking a tow arm, and then something else happening, and it puts you out of the race? He said this car should be better than this. And he's got some valid points about it, because we've seen a number of races throughout the season so far that have been decided by a broken tow arm, something back there in the back that has cost the team, that should be something that can be changed in a short period of time, but NASCAR doesn't give them enough time to be able to do it. So that pretty much shot his chances, although he's like 7 out, I think, -7 out from the cut line right now. But, it's anybody's guess right now who's going to get these final two spots. It's either going to be a winner that's going to come through here, a winner's going to come through and lock in that 1 point and then have that final opening for whoever else is the follow-up driver. We don't know how it's going to go just yet. There are a lot of these drivers right now that have their backs to the wall. I wouldn't say Kyle Larson has his back to the wall as much as a Chase Elliott or a Denny Hamlin in this case, but still, it is going to be a very tense race coming up on Sunday at Martinsville, and I expect all the stops to come out.
Yeah, I look at the numbers here. I see Elliott is in eighth right now, 43 back of the current cut line.
Hmm.
That's assuming there's not a winner amongst this group that throws that curve off. And then Ryan Blaney right now would be what, 38 points back. Hamlin, you mentioned he's 18 points back. Larson 7 points back. But that's assuming nobody from that group wins, and we've seen that kind of wild card thrown in before. Christopher Bell's in the best shape. He's
Right.
got the most points. He's at 41-32. I can imagine that he could even have a terrible race, get knocked out early, and still go through. But everybody else, from William Byron, Carl Larson, Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, Chase Elliott, they got work to do. It might be good advice to any of them if they're in the lead there towards the end to go ahead and race all out to try to get that win.
And I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb, and I'm going to say this for all of you Hendrick script writers that are out there. It always comes down to a race at Martinsville, whether it's the spring or the fall race, of where something gets mentioned about a Hendrick driver. People start thinking back to the heartbreak and everything else that's happened with the Hendrick Motorsports team. Of course, Rick Hendrick losing his son, Ricky, in that plane crash here several years ago outside of Martinsville. There's just so much with this. And I know there are people that say that when they go to Martinsville, that's kind of like the script. So, they're sticking to the script, so to speak. And I think, had a quote at the spring race when Andrew and I attended the spring race there at Martinsville. Jeff Gordon even said it. You couldn't write this better in a script, is what he said. And there's going to be a lot of people that's going to say, well, it may be a Hendrick race to win or lose one way or the other. But let's go back and look at last year. Ryan Blaney, he had to win to get into the chase, into the final, championship point, and he did. So that kind of breaks that little, Hendrick sort of curse right there. But I really don't know what to see. I mean, it's going to be a race full of pandemonium. There's going to be a lot of bumps. There's going to be a lot of rubbing. We're probably going to see some fights. I think we'll see some fights toward the very end, and I may be going out on a limb with that, but everything is just on the line for some of these guys right now. I don't see it coming out of Kyle Larson as much, but I do see if Chase Elliott gets knocked out and he had a car that was, good enough to win and gets knocked out, I see Chase Elliott probably going at somebody. Denny Hamlin, truthfully, it's either his race to win, come out of it, and brag a little bit more going into the championship 4 race, or it's a chance for us to go either cry for him or make fun of him because of how he has said, I've rebounded back from all this adversity and so forth. We're just going to have to wait and see. It's going to be an exciting race this coming weekend at Martinsville, and I expect it to be a full house at Martinsville this coming weekend.
Yeah, this is the race to have and the playoffs. I mean, aside from the championship race itself, this is the fun one to have
Mhm.
for a track. A nice coup for Martinsville to get that again. Hey, let's go some off the track news. So we just talked about Tyler Reddick and how he punched his ticket.
Right.
Of course, he drives for 2311 Racing, co-owned by Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan. And a lot of the stick and ball sports writers are excited about Michael Jordan having a chance at the championship. And, I saw a lot of headlines about that on social media and such this the past few days. Other news out of 2311, the other prominent driver, Bubba Wallace, who did not make the playoffs this year, some changes on his team to maybe get him back in the championship mix for next year.
Yeah, and mention the name for me of who they have handed it over to. I just remember seeing that, but I saw where Booty Barker is going to kind of take a different kind of place in this whole situation. He's going to go and move out of being the crew chief, and he's going to go into more of an advisory role, so to speak, inside the organization. And they're going to turn this over to a guy that is familiar with, of course, racing and so forth, but they feel like they need a little bit more oomph in their car for next year, and he'll
Is
start being the crew chief in 2025.
is the pronunciation is Charles Dinicky? Does that sound
Yeah,
right?
I think that's it. Yeah, that's the
Okay.
name. I was trying to remember the name right off, and it's part of the thing of Alzheimer's with my age, I guess. But I just couldn't remember it. But yeah, he's gonna step in. He's going to take over the role of Booty Barker, and a lot of people like Booty Barker in the pits. He's known for taking chances, being in a race. He's had a great record. I think he even did some crew chiefing back in the day of Michael Waltrip when Michael Waltrip was driving. He knows his stuff, but they did not want to get rid of him completely. So he's going to kind of go into an advisory mode. I'd almost kind of reckon the advising mode to sort of be like a little bit like what Chad Knaus kind of does for Rick Hendrick in Hendrick Motorsports, kind of overseeing the program to see what's going on. We haven't heard much about Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch has been doing some advising and so forth. We know that Kurt Busch had got involved in some some escapades with the law here a little while back, being caught with a DUI in North Carolina. But I haven't really heard that much if Kurt Busch is contributing that much at the track. I don't see him that much. I didn't see him. I may have caught a glimpse of him at Bristol. I think, yeah, he was at Bristol, but I don't see him that much. Don't see him, don't hear him talk about him that much, except he's been doing some advising to Reddick and he's been doing advising to Bubba Wallace and so forth. So that's going to be, I guess, the key thing right there is Booty Barker's going to do that sort of thing. Who knows? Kurt Busch might be fading out and going somewhere else before it's over with. He's not going to be coming back to racing anytime soon. So he may be moving into a different situation. So we'll just have to wait and see how that materializes.
There's also some new updated news, I guess, in the antitrust case
Right.
that involves 2311 and also Front Row Motorsports. What's the latest there?
Well, the NASCAR teams and the NASCAR and the teams, if I can get it out right, they had filings due on October 23rd as a part of a preliminary injunction process where 2311 and Front Row Motorsports were asking to compete as chartered teams while pursuing the lawsuit that they cite a clause in the charter agreement that would prohibit them from suing. Now, a hearing on the preliminary injunction is due for November the 4th. NASCAR filed its response to the 2311 Front Row preliminary injunction motion. And obviously, NASCAR doesn't want to give them that benefit to run as a chartered team. It's kind of that belief. It's either you run all of them or you don't run any of them. And so a hearing on the preliminary injunction, like we said, going to take place on November the 4th. And they are going to consider 13, they're considering 13 out of the 15 Cup organizations have signed the charter agreements, meaning the only two that haven't were 2311 and Front Row. NASCAR says it plans to run 2025 with 32 chartered teams instead of 36 this year, 8 open cars instead of 4, and it's 40 car field. So 2311 and Front Row currently have 2 charters apiece that they have yet to sign for. And NASCAR is arguing out of this whole thing that Front Row and 2311 don't meet the requirements for the injunction because they can still compete as open teams, and that any damages they suffer if they prevail in the case can be covered monetarily. Now, here's an update that I got a little bit later on from it. 2311 and Front Row reiterated many of their previous arguments, but with a couple of new points that they hope that it can at least help them find or land the preliminary injunction. They argue that if a team races as an open team, they still have to sign the NASCAR Open Team Agreement, which includes the same clause that would release NASCAR of any claims the team makes in a lawsuit. So even to proceed fielding open non-chartered cars, the teams will still need an injunction to pursue the lawsuit. So what I guess I'm trying to say is here, you can run as an open car or in the open field if you want to, but you still have to sign an agreement, which means you're not going to hold NASCAR liable or, responsible for certain situations, how this goes. And, I heard a great talk this past week of a couple of people just referring their thoughts about this whole thing, and I'll keep them nameless. But, there are a lot of people right now that's just saying that this makes the whole sport look a little bit more scripted, almost. This makes it look scripted. It's look at what's going on, look at the entitlements, look at what's bearing right here. Then, they said the Tyler Reddick win, that was a great kind of FU moment, sort of, to NASCAR, to say, hey, look, we won the race and so forth. It's there, and the same person had already predicted too. They said, well, Logano's going to win the next race coming out of the pack. And he was right. He picked it. But, it still leaves a lot of, I guess, unheard of sort of things where we don't hear everything being said, although NASCAR says it's cut and dry. 2311 and Front Row Motorsports says, hey, look, you want us to run as an open car. Well, maybe we can run as an open car, but still you're going to make us abide by the charter as to what it boils down to. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. That's kind of the way that they're feeling that NASCAR is being about this whole thing.
Yeah, you need a law degree now to be able to cover NASCAR.
Right.
That's what I'm thinking. after sitting in court the other the other day on a listening to a election rights case.
Mhm.
So last thing, since I'll talk news there just a little bit, your Dickinson Media. What do you got going on down at Dickinson Media, the new sports and news website down in your part of Virginia?
Oh, we got a lot of good stuff right now covering the big controversy right now in Dickinson County in regard to the superintendent. We've had a number of some, and I know everybody in the state of Virginia, really in a five-state area, pretty close to where we're at, have had a lot of problems this year involving threats at school, threats of shooting, different things like that. Right now, we're covering a thing that happened between actually two kids. One brought a gun to school and then took it back home on a school bus, and was first told that he had it in his bag, but then later on, another parent has said no, he was showing the gun openly to people on the school bus. And then also, we've got another thing too coming out of that, of where a child that was 8 years old made a threat on the playground, and the threat was to shoot up a bunch of kids or something like that, or shoot up the school. That kid got ended up sending to being sent to juvie, as I call it, juvenile domestic, down in Bristol, I guess is where that's at. And so right now, the big push is going on here in this part of Virginia, especially in Southwest Virginia, with a petition by parents trying to go and remove the current school superintendent. So that's very interesting right now at this point. School safety, school security, not getting the job done. Also, a lot of things being the communication gap, so to speak. Not wanting to speak to the media that much about what's going on. That's where a lot of this stuff lies right now. That's part of it, along with some of the other stuff that's going on at Bristol Motor Speedway. I know they made the big announcement. If you guys ever get a chance and you're coming down this way, especially in wintertime, you guys really, you and Crystal both need to take advantage of Speedway and Lights at Bristol Motor Speedway. They made a big announcement this past weekend, this past week, concerning Food City, who's a normal sponsor of the 500 in March and April, and then the Food City 300 in September. They are going full pledged into a multi-year agreement where they were going to be the sole sponsor, or they're going to be the sponsor of the Speedway and Lights at Bristol Motor Speedway. They have it at Charlotte. It's a great thing for raising funds for Speedway Children's Charities, and you have people that go and apply for grants or money that's given to them from Speedway Children's Charities to help their organization out in certain things. And so that's another thing we've been following down here.
How can folks follow you on Dickinson Media?
Well, they can go online and follow us at dickinsonmedia.substack.com, and they can follow us there. And we also have a Facebook page, and we'll be issuing things from our part of Virginia down here and talking about some things. And we finally now have got the capability of going live on our Facebook page, and also working on that with Substack. And so we're going to be doing some different things. We've already been approached by one of the local governments down here, and of all things, a town council, and they've asked if we would start streaming their meetings. And I think that's great. That just came to me one night. I went to cover a local meeting, and they said, "Would you be interested in streaming for us? We'd like to have our meeting streamed." And I said, "If you've got nothing to hide, I don't have a problem with it." And they kind of laughed about it and said, "That's the reason why we're asking you. We don't have anything to hide, so we want people to see it." So I think that's a great move, on their part, to want to go and have streaming, and then for them to trust us enough to, trust me to be able to go and do that for them.
Look at this, Rod Mullins, media mogul.
Oh gosh, no, we're not. I'm not to the part of a Rupert Murdoch yet, and I don't want to even be considered a Rupert Murdoch in any kind of sense of the word. But still,
Yeah, you're moving in their directions. That's great. That's great. Well, Rod, as always, thank you for your time and your insight.
I appreciate it. Thanks.